Hi folks, you're with Tastus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the almost incredible changes that have happened over the last 20 odd years in the sort of pay, salary and compensation as well for private sector jobs, and the compensation available for government and NGO jobs. Now, 20 plus years ago, say 30 years ago, it was widely considered that if you wanted a stable job for life, but very ordinary pay, but a stable job, but good retirement income, or good retirement plan, then you would go and work for the government in the public service. And you would start there, you would get some bullshit college degree, you'd start there at 20 or 21 years old in the public service, and you would stay there until 65 or thereabouts, and you'd retire. And provided you weren't stupid with your money, you'd kind of do all right. It was a very stable job. You knew year to year how much money was going to come in the door, and so you could easily plan over the longer term and take some long-term mortgage and things like that. So, but it wasn't very good pay. The private sector had higher risk. You could lose your job. You could be held to account for performance, these sorts of things. But you could make a lot more money. So that was kind of how it was. Now NGOs, there weren't that many of them around. There's been an absolute explosion of NGOs since the early 1990s, when the globalists took over. So it must be just a coincidence, I guess. But the amount of NGOs, or the NGOs back in the day, rather, they paid, very bad money. It was worse than the public service. The benefit was you kind of didn't have to be there at 9 o'clock. You could turn up at 10 if you wanted. If you needed to leave at 4, you could. And they didn't work you very hard. And you could. They had other sort of benefits, like they used to have nice, staff amenities like nice tea rooms and lots of chocolate biscuits and things like that. So it was considered a nice sort of easy, relaxed job, not very taxing, but it didn't pay very well. In fact, it paid so badly that because the NGOs were treated or considered as charities, they got some tax breaks, so they could give you, top up your pay with some tax-free money. But even with that, it still didn't pay that well, certainly well less than the average wage. But boy, have things changed. Wow. I mentioned this a few days ago. There's an NGO that's sort of embedded in a university, and as a university student organizer, 3 days a week job pays $180,000 a year plus benefits. The director of diversity at a university gets paid $400,000 a year. Whereas, and I've mentioned this sort of thing before as well, an engineer in charge of building a major bridge will get $250,000 a year. So now, say a third or fourth year engineer, even a fifth year civil engineer, who's by now starting to get some responsibility, they will be paid less than a social affairs advisor in an NGO. So that gives you an idea as to the extent to which things have changed in terms of incomes. Incomes in the private sector have absolutely flatlined over the years, whereas incomes in the government sector and in amongst NGOs, they've just kicked on. They've kept on going. Cost of living pay rises for government employees sort of turn in year after year after year, whereas the rate for the private sector weren't getting those sort of raises, so they've been passed. But if I look at, and this is really telling here, this is in Sydney, which is Australia's biggest city. A little while ago, I was looking at one of the major job boards, and I looked at the top 100 best paid advertised jobs in Sydney. So these are the top 100 best paid jobs that are being advertised. Now, a lot of jobs now are being given, through the crony network. It's almost getting as corrupt as some piss poor South American banana republic in the West these days. But anyway, coming back at the 100 best paid jobs, 61 of them were for government and NGOs. Then there was a slab that were for big financial firms, and they advertise, but they never hire people through that. It's always a buddies system for them. So in terms of independent businesses that are not reliant on government contracts, that are out there trying to make a buck and do their best, there was, I think, 16 of those out of 100. So, and you'd be working hard there. You'd be starting early and finishing late and busting your ass to make places like that work, which is fine. I used to do that sort of thing. I've got no problem with it. I still do it, for goodness sakes. But this shows how many government and NGO jobs. Now, this is, remember, the best paid jobs in Sydney. And Sydney is the biggest city in Australia. So the best paid jobs, 60% of them are not in the private sector, but in the government and NGO sector. And the NGO sector is running slightly ahead of the government. So out of the top say 100 jobs, the best paid ones, 32 of them are for NGOs or so-called charities. So this is insane. These people create no wealth. They get incredible tax breaks, interfering with Western governance and democracy and rule of law. These are the guys that are organising the agitators to do the climate change rebellions, and also they're disruptive. They're spreading mayhem and causing trouble wherever they go, but they're given tax exemption, special protection by the government. There's armies of lawyers that flock to these people to look after them, protect them through the legal system. And so this is the situation now, that you'd be lucky if even 5% in the top paying jobs would be government and NGO. In fact, it wouldn't even be that. It was wall-to-wall private sector. But that's how much things have changed in 20 to 25 years. Only 4 in 10 jobs are from the private sector, and of those, big finance and big pharma take up a few. But there's now maybe 15, 16%, say 20% to be generous, 20% of the best paid jobs are actually in the wealth creating private sector. So if that's not a recipe for going downhill, the Western world, that is, going downhill in terms of wealth creation and new wealth, and in terms of our future, I don't know what is. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.